Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. A little bit of a different video today for most of my followers. I'm sure you follow me for the most part for AMC, maybe a little bit for Bitcoin, and a little bit for just the entertainment value. Today will not be much about AMC, but boy, it was a very newsy day today in markets and some politics. Don't worry, I'm not going political, but it's going to connect just to some financial news. I'm going to hit that. So today will be just kind of an unpacking of some of the stuff I saw today. Um, and I don't know, just crack open a beer or a glass of milk or something and enjoy kind of seeing what happened today and thinking about some things. And let's just go through that together real quick. So, if you missed, there were a series of very large earnings releases. I'm not going to hit all of them. I'm just going to hit a few that I saw and was kind of tracking. So, just real interesting to watch the people who really move the markets. Obviously, Microsoft came out and actually beat on some of their numbers. So, if you see my bullets kind of at the bottom right, kind of beat on some numbers, but interesting that their cloud growth kind of was slowing and caused a little bit of jitters, I think. And if you want to take note of their forward guidance, I've told you all that I worked at this Dow Jones company for a long time. And one of the things I had to learn over time, there'd be these quarters exactly like this, where we'd release our earnings and I'd be like, sweet, we beat the numbers. And then I'd watch our stock go down and I was like, what's going on? What I found over time, at least at that company, was Wall Street tended to price in about 6 months in advance, kind of looking forward at the next 6 months of business and pricing some things in. And so what'll happen too, you learn that if there are assumptions that are made that are all baked into the price, right? You see the funny meme about like the dinosaurs and the meteors coming, and they're like, "Don't worry, it's priced in." Well, that's the idea with Wall Street is there's a host of assumptions about the future of various businesses, and those are priced in to today's stock price. And you get into some things about the time value of money and anticipation of future growth and all kinds of things. And that's why when like rates move or assumptions change, you'll see stock prices shift pretty quickly because basically all these models have been built for all these companies that are really big investors. And then as soon as those models have to be adjusted, you see some pretty quick adjustments to the price. And we're going to actually look at that too and talk about how fast stocks can shift on you. So Tesla also then released earnings, and really interesting, Tesla actually missed. So if you saw Microsoft beat and yet went down, Tesla missed and yet went up, at least in after hours. And we're going to take a look at that in a minute too. So you can kind of see some of the headlines that net income was down, revenue was down, but interesting that Tesla provided a bit of a positive forward view. So again, that's the sort of pricing in the future into today's price of the stock. They were talking a little bit about cost cutting. This was kind of in the call after hours. Having some cheaper cars, so perhaps Wall Street or investors around the globe are kind of counting on that, perhaps increasing the top line a bit. Obviously, a lot of discussions about AI. I heard for a little while Kathy Wood came on a space call on X, and I just listened to that for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes and heard her discussing kind of all things AI around Tesla. And so that's the thing. If you think of Tesla as a car company, obviously then you need to expand out and be thinking about robotics, generally intelligence. So I know Elon talked a bit about sort of the future of autonomous things and kind of electric everything. He was talking about not just road travel, but air travel. And you know that they're getting into kind of perhaps taxi services. They're going to roll that out in Austin. And by the way, I don't own any of the stocks I'm talking about here. I don't have any Microsoft right now. I don't have any Tesla. I have in the past. Many of you know how, I don't know, deeply I am in sort of AMC, GameStop, Bitcoin. And until we win, that's generally where I am. But I'd like to track the overall market. So don't take me as either pumping or dumping on any of these stocks. That's not what I do. I'm just telling you some things I see in the marketplace. So I guess a bit of disclosure there that I don't own these stocks. But yeah, so I think the discussion of the future of AI, the future of kind of electric everything, and the future of perhaps Tesla rolling out some cheaper models, that even though they missed this quarter, there was a more positive view, at least in after hours, right? You want to track over the next few days and weeks, how is the market going to digest this information and respond? I would say on both Microsoft then and on Tesla. Coming back to that cloud piece of Microsoft, I mentioned things being priced in. So what you've got is if there's a slowing of growth, which was kind of hypothesis I had on Nvidia for quite a while. If you see extreme growth priced in, then if that growth slows at all, then Wall Street has to, if you've got a company with, say, 50 years of earnings priced into the value today of the stock, and all of a sudden it says, hey, we're just growing by 2% less. Well, 2% less, if you have something called a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, over 50 years, all of a sudden that stock has got to go down quickly. And so that's what you'll get is sometimes when a company gives forward guidance that's a little less aggressive, you're like, man, it wasn't that big of a change, but the stock moved a lot. Well, that's because the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Metas of the world have many, many years of earnings priced into today. So at some point we should talk about price to earnings and something called a PEG ratio, price to earnings over growth. But when future growth starts to slow, these companies will shift on you very fast. And so that's why a lot of us have been tracking the Mag 7 and giving some warning signals. You would find me on X giving all kinds of warning signals over the last year. Meta, on the other hand, was very positive in after hours. Beat on revenue, grew net income. Just kind of an interesting thing. If you track the history of Zuckerberg, or Zuck, if you all want to call him that, if you watched kind of 2020 and obviously the discussion on censorship and a lot of things that have gone on since then, it felt like Zuck, and I generally avoid being political here, so I'm going to say things in sort of more of a neutral view here. Felt like Zuck was really leaning left and was participating in sort of censorship and things like that online. So I'm not going to say pro con any of that here. I'm letting you just have your own point of view. But interesting to see his pivot lately. If you've watched, there also was some news about him settling some issues with Trump in terms of an actual settlement. And so all of a sudden him going on Joe Rogan, I think surprised a lot of us. Some of the things he said felt like quite the pivot. And so it's up to you. I suppose I'm betraying a little bit of my point of view here, but whether you buy into his pivot or whether you think it's sort of placating who's in power now. You have to decide on that. But just I found it interesting then in the earnings call that he praised this current administration as sort of a place where he's going to be able to do a lot of innovation, and he was signaling kind of maybe some growth in earnings on that. And so then Tesla had some positive moves. There is a company many of you have probably not heard of. I just want to share it because there's a funny personal connection here. So Wolfspeed, for a minute, was up like 5 or 6% in after hours. I'm going to show you some charts of all of these guys in a minute. That has since eroded. But so they beat expectations. They shared that their digital transformation has been accelerating and taking hold, and so there's some positive movement there. Again, I don't own these stocks. I don't own any Wolfspeed. I did at one point, quite a while back, a couple of years ago, and they're basically the market's been questioning some things about their liquidity, and so they kind of showed that they're doing pretty well. And so I think there was maybe an immediate response to that. They have a lot of solutions and innovations kind of in batteries and metals for batteries and a lot of electric conductivity and some things like that. So they might be a play in sort of the electrification of everything as well, and that's why I had learned about them. And interestingly enough, had once been in a meeting where their chief tech officer had presented. And so I actually knew about this digital transformation. At that time, I did not own any stocks, so there was nothing untoward here. It was just part of my job. I was in a conference where he was presenting, and I was in a smaller meeting. Anyway, but so I've known about their digital transformation. They're just actually broader business transformation for a while now, and kind of have been tracking them. So that's why it was just interesting to me to see them in the news after hours. But again, I don't own this stock right now. So looking at after hours movement, some pretty significant things. You can see Tesla. And what I want you to actually look at on all of these, note the radical movement bang down, in a moment's notice, and then very quickly back up, really kind of a couple times. So some of this probably related to things being said in the earnings call. Same thing then with Microsoft. Note the bam, sudden movement, then a quick snap back up, and then boom, sudden movement again, just kind of, straight down. That's people will talk about, you take the escalator up and the elevator down. Now you're seeing that a little bit in these stocks all today. Very interesting that this was all today. Meta had that quick move down, but again, the very quick move back up, and kind of a little bit of herky-jerky there, before it flattened out. And then Wolfspeed, same. I told you it was up kind of 5 or, well, I guess even like 7% in after hours for a minute there, but down just as fast. And in after hours, ultimately, at the time I took all these snapshots, a few minutes ago, it was kind of back to flat. So what I wanted to highlight here, especially for anyone kind of out there trading or thinking about trading, is we talk about high frequency trading, we talk about algorithms, we talk about pro traders. I've highlighted these issues around AMC and a little bit on GameStop in the past. And I just want you to take note of how quickly things can move, and that you're not going to out trade. Just look at this volume candle too, all of these volume candles, and that sudden move. I just don't personally think you're out trading that. So any trading strategy, you've got to take that into consideration. And you think through your emotions, you think through your long-term strategies, and you think through the discipline of what you're doing in your trades. Because had you, for instance, freaked out here on this move with Tesla and then gotten out, and then boom, it runs the other way, and now you've missed all that. Or vice versa, if you had planned on Microsoft going up and then in a moment it's down. So you just have to think through your strategies and your your thesis. I'm more of a thesis investor. I am not a technicals investor, so I won't even bother trying to compete with some of you guys on that. I've learned a lot about technicals certainly over these few years, but I'm a bit more of a thesis investor, and really just here, even for you technical investors, just want to continue to highlight, be careful, have a plan, have your discipline. That's very different, obviously, than AMC. For me, with AMC, it's just kind of ride or die. And I think I've proved that over 4 years now, but just kind of wanted to show you some of that in the after hours. So big day today on earnings. Let's switch a little bit. So I'm just kind of calling this next couple slides JPOW and Trump. It's been interesting to watch. You saw how Trump has put a lot of pressure on the Fed to lower rates. I'm not going to read this post, maybe screenshot this or go look it up for yourself. But basically, Trump is still putting a lot of pressure on JPOW. We'll watch what happens with rates. Powell did even talk today, so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Trump just saying, hey, there's a lot of moves I'm going to make because these guys haven't put their arms around inflation. And certainly if you look at the last 4 years, I think if in fact, I'll point you to a couple videos I did. If you look for any videos around Bitcoin and around debasement, I would look at those, especially that concept of debasement. And, the Fed and the Treasury just printing the dollar. Just think about, we talk about dilution in stocks, right? Your government and your banking central bankers have been diluting the US dollar for a couple generations, really. And so I've got whole videos where I talk about that. And so that really drives inflation. I tell my children and any friends of mine who will listen, it's not so much that your stuff is costing more. That's what we think of as inflation. What's really happening is your money is worth less. They've been driving down the value of the dollar steady since the 1970s at least, and maybe even kind of longer than that, depends on how you want to look at it. And so if for now, 50 to 60 years, the dollar has steadily been losing value against anything. Basically look at it against anything. It's been losing all of its value. Then there's a problem. And that is making it cost more for you to put food on the table and clothes on backs and pay for your insurance and put your kids through college. And this is being done to you by the central bankers and by the politicians. And so it's a big, big deal. So, love Trump, hate Trump. He's at least saying he's going to get after inflation, and let us watch that and see. So that was, I think, big news today that's going to continue to put pressure, which is obviously what Trump does, right? He gets very loud and very vocal until either people sort of fall in line or he says, hey, I'm just going to take this in my own hands and do it. So I honestly do think he will get after inflation. Let us see. Of course, now we can have an economic argument about some of the policies, but that's a whole other video that I'm not going to do today. By the way, I have quite a bit of experience in global trade and actually matters having to do with import taxes. And so all this conversation on tariffs, I may do a video sometime and kind of talk about some of the ins and outs of that, because I actually have direct experience on a lot of that. But that's not for today. So then a couple things I want to draw your attention to with Powell and the Fed. So first off, this is more of the SEC, but I want to tie this in. So about a week ago, you would see a lot of discussion from various people around Bitcoin and crypto around some basically rules that got kind of pulled back, which effectively will kind of let banks custody Bitcoin. And so that is a big, big deal because if you think the ETFs were a big deal, and they were, but then, I've been signaling people for a long time that it wasn't now just the ETFs, but now the next stage is sovereign entities are going to start stacking Bitcoin. So you've seen, I keep posting on X when I see news about various states. Told you guys here on my channel, there's probably now getting close, I don't know, it's more than a dozen states. We're getting into the teens maybe that are rumbling about taking strategic Bitcoin reserves at a state level. So like Utah and Arizona seem like they're kind of first. Looks like Arizona is probably going to be first. I've seen, oh gosh, Iowa, Illinois, one of the Dakotas. We've seen Massachusetts. I can't even remember all the states off the top of my head. Texas was one. Florida was one. So you're going to see a whole bunch of states start to purchase Bitcoin in their state reserves. And then, of course, there's been, if you track Cynthia Lummis, sorry, I should check into how to get her name right, senator from Wyoming. She's been placed on kind of a prestigious committee that is getting after crypto, and she's been very clear and very vocal that she's going to be getting after strategic Bitcoin reserves at the federal level. And so then, so if you think of, there's the ETFs, there's the sovereigns that are stacking Bitcoin, and then what I'm showing you here on the top left is now banks being able to custody Bitcoin. I've told you for a while that I believe a lot of financial instruments will start to come into play. Banks like to monetize things. And so if you think of, if you have real estate, that's been monetized for a long time, right? In the same way, I have a feeling you're going to start to see a lot of financial instruments around Bitcoin, especially as the banks are allowed to play. And so then I'm going to try something new today, guys. I've embedded a video of just like 25 seconds or something. And here's Jerome Powell talking today about allowing the banks to kind of play in crypto. Okay, I didn't hear that in my I didn't hear that on my side. I have a feeling you guys didn't either. Who knows? Maybe I will clip this out. So the point is, just in case I had to clip that out, I'm gonna just talk about that real quick here. What basically happened was Powell kind of talked about, hey, we know that the banks are going to be able to start engaging with crypto a lot more. And then actually what happened that I'm going to show you here in a little bit is basically then all of crypto jumped when so if JPOW starts talking, stuff starts moving, right? So effectively, I just want to tie together that you saw the SEC loosen the reins on banks being able to engage with crypto, and then JPOW was talking about it today as well. That's all I'm kind of making sure you know about that. So here you go. What happened was Bitcoin was down a little bit at that time, and then look at how quickly it had moved up. Kind of, I think it chased close to close to 105. You can see the high of the day was 104.8. And so that move is just the market's basically saying, okay, yeah, it's starting to get real serious that the banks are going to engage with crypto a lot more. By the way, for me, just in terms of, I don't know, a mentality or a point of view, call it even a thesis, if you will. For me, there's Bitcoin and there's crypto, and I almost separate them in my mind. So I don't mean to kind of interchange those, but I know that many of you are probably in multiple versions of crypto. So I just want to show that at the right as well. And you can see that same, if you just look at that pattern, that sort of jump at the same time on all of them. So basically all of crypto kind of jumped when Jay Powell said, hey, the banks are going to effectively enter this market a lot more. All right, enough on that. So maybe you saw, switching a little bit to GameStop here, and then just one or two more slides and then we're done for today. Ryan Cohen moved his shares. So what you can just see here, on the left I'm showing you, so these are both from today's filing. On the left, it's actually in his name. So that's why even it's like, where's the citizenship? Okay, it's a Canada. His all of these shares, his sole voting power. So this 36 plus million shares. And then the RC Ventures on the right, that's why this says Delaware over here, now has 0 shares. So effectively, he moved the shares from RC Ventures to his own name. You look up sometimes some things about share transfers. There are some theories out there, like about a system called ACATS and some other things that does it make brokers kind of locate shares. You'll see conflicting information on that, by the way. So I didn't want to do a whole DD video on that and speculate on why he moved his shares. But it's certainly not a nothing. And I suppose you want to, just do some DD, or perhaps I'll follow up in another video. We'll see, about kind of why do people transfer shares? What can that trigger? But don't go too I don't love when people do smoking guns, right? We've been here 4 years, and how many smoking guns have you seen? Or silver bullets, maybe I should say, both on AMC and GameStop. Like, this is it, this is the one. And, over time, there's a saying I like, which is like, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I've talked about how influencers will hype you up so that later you can kind of just be disappointed. And then over time, enough disappointments and you start to break. So don't let me overhype you on this, but I did want to just draw your attention. It's not a nothing, it's at least something. And maybe just research a little bit. I already saw some theories out there that I disagree with, because one thing I want to draw your attention to is you can see the percent of ownership as well, and that being only 8%. I mean, so Ryan only owns 8%, at least in this, under his name, these shares that were transferred in this filing, that's that 8%. So just track that a little bit. I've got some personal theories I'm not willing to share just yet, but wanted to at least just share that happened today in terms of news. All right, so obviously we can't have a sort of a newsy video without talking about Nvidia and DeepSeek this week. You saw the initial reaction was this huge nosedive. I did tweet about it a little bit. I think Nvidia was maybe down like 17% that day. The next day was up a bit. Today back down. So you can see since kind of this news has happened, I'm just showing you the 5-day view. Just from my phone. I think I've told you guys, Webull is not my broker, but it's just easy to take snapshots on my phone from them, and so you can see down 16% basically on the week. Will be interesting to keep tracking Nvidia. So if you see now, tie that back earlier to the beginning of the video. Microsoft down, obviously Facebook up, Tesla up, Nvidia down. There's some significant shifts in market cap across the market, and it has long been a theory of mine. I saw a troll try to take a shot at me over this. Good luck with that. That perhaps there are some leveraged positions being supported broadly by the Mag 7. We will see. We've got to let that wash out. So far this week, I haven't seen any signals of anything, all that crazy. But let's just keep watching in coming days. What does this mean? What does this do to the overall market? Does it start to, portend bigger moves? That's another video. I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to at least talk a little bit about Nvidia and DeepSeek. As the dust clears, what I'm seeing in the news, and probably many of you have seen, but just to draw out some headlines, I think there's a broader question of what's true and what's fake. And what I mean by that is actually really the second bullet is a big part of it. There's some back and forth over whether these guys really did this with as few chips and sort of as dated of chips as they said they did this with. And really the third bullet there, then at what cost? So there's a question around, did they really, actually let me even back up in case you've been under a rock and haven't followed this news. Basically, DeepSeek came out and effectively said, hey, they've been doing some of the same work as some of the large AI companies, like say OpenAI and ChatGPT, and that they're doing it at a radically lower cost than what we've been seeing. Well, if they're doing it with sort of less chips and older chips than others are doing it, then suddenly the Nvidia thesis takes a big hit. Now think back to earlier in this video when I said you price in future earnings into today's price of the stock. And if all of a sudden the market says, oh my gosh, Nvidia may be selling less shares and growing slower, then that's a big deal. Nvidia had about 50 years of earnings priced in, and that's already some very radical levels of earnings. So if there's any slowdown or even, God forbid, a step backwards on their business model, then you will see a huge repricing of Nvidia. So that's what's going on. The market's trying to figure out what's real, what's fake. How many chips did these guys use? Which chips did they use? At what cost did they really do it? How much can it be replicated? And then on top of all that, there's a question on what's fake news and what's kind of almost corporate espionage at this point, because you're seeing news come out like, oh, actually, DeepSeek is Chinese and they're going to record all of your information and capture all of your information as it might not be safe. And will Trump basically say, hey, we can't have this in America? So it kind of becomes the TikTok conversation 2.0 in a way. And then on top of that, I've seen some people showing, if it's to be believed, live footage of them interacting with this AI and it effectively kind of doing Chinese censorship. Like if you ask questions about, say, Tiananmen Square, or if you ask questions about the CCP or something like that, and it kind of in real time, at first giving a real answer and then basically censoring itself on behalf of the Communist Party, and then wiping out some information and restating information. So I am just watching it all as news. I don't know what's real myself yet. I'm not going to give you too deep of a point of view on that. Um, but also comically, what of IP I'm saying here? So intellectual property and the IP irony, whatever. Interesting that part of the conversation, basically OpenAI complaining like, hey, these guys might have trained their models on our information, but did it for free and took our information. Well, the complaint against OpenAI is they took, let's say, movies, news, stories, books, content that us content providers maybe have created, and they trained their models on everybody's intellectual property for free, and then now is complaining that someone else did that to them. So I find the irony, or that's why I'm just the IP irony of that. So there you go, Nvidia and DeepSeek, a lot going on there. Let's keep track of that. And then DJT. So speaking of crypto and taking a bounce, you guys know I've said before I'm real interested in like AMC and GameStop putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Basically today, DJT announced that they would start investing kind of as a financial arm as well in Bitcoin, and immediately it popped up like 15%. So there's that whole thing again of where you're not going to be able to outtrade sort of the nanosecond high frequency trading machines. But even then after the dip was up about 7% today. So here at the top. So that's just interesting, an announcement that they're investing effectively in crypto and in particular in Bitcoin, and an immediate bounce on that for them. Last bit of news. I had a laugh today. If you saw, here's the thing. First of all, again, I'm gonna try to strike a neutral tone here, and the integrity of me being neutral here is I will call out both red and blue. You've heard me say many times, I reject political tribalism. I hate it. I think it's stupid. I think you should stand on principles. And so on a principle, I'm going to call out Elizabeth Warren that go look up, you can see how much money she has taken from pharmaceuticals. It is in the millions of dollars. She has taken a lot of money from pharmaceuticals. And so she actually asked RFK Jr. today, basically, would you take money from pharmaceuticals? And he actually kind of laughed, and as did I, because his whole thing right now is effectively kind of fighting against a lot of perhaps corruption and at least greed among the pharmaceutical companies. And so he said, I don't think they'd want to pay me. And so I don't know, I found humor in that and just wanted to call out. And again, let me not be partisan here. Look up sometime on both the red and blue side and people who are opposing him, and then look at money, payouts they've taken from pharmaceuticals, and that will be very educational for you. So found some humor in that moment today. And then lastly, just for fun, I'm not going to explain these. I had given the definition the other day of imperturbability. You are not alone. Cat's whiskers, that's actually not who many of you would think I'm probably talking about. The cat's whiskers sends love, and we will win. So let's go.